Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Life Force Academy. Life Force Academy, wonderful way to have a steady, fresh, inspiring meditation, yoga practice, exercise system. Keeps the mind calm, intuitively clear, the heart connected to our genuine sense of purpose, good vitality for the body. Feel good, feel great. Life Force Academy. If you go to lifeforce.yoga, that's the URL, just type that in, lifeforce.yoga. As a listener of this podcast, you can begin a 14-day trial for just $1. You can experience all that's in there, live streams every week, tons of on-demand classes, practices, tools to help us feel good, stay healthy, stay happy, stay joyful, stay connected to our genuine sense of purpose. Life Force Academy, just go to lifeforce.yoga. That's lifeforce.yoga. Enjoy the podcast. Greetings, friends. This is Jai Dave. Hope you're doing really well out there. Sending lots of love and wishes for good health and vitality to you and your family. Thanks for listening today. This is the fourth installment of the series of episodes that were recorded at Envision Festival in Costa Rica this past February. In the Life Force Academy Lounge. If you haven't heard the 3 other episodes that were just recently released, check those out with Rachel Brathen, aka Yoga Girl, Sarah Wu of Village Witch, Stephen Brooks, co-founder of Envision, and Punta Mona. All very inspiring people. And so if you haven't heard those episodes, the setting for this conversation that you're about to hear is in the Life Force Academy Lounge at Envision Festival, in the hot jungle of Costa Rica, in between the 2 yoga halls. So it's a spirited festival. There's a lot going on. It's a wonderful festival. So inspiring there. So much creativity. So much good education. It's so much more than a music festival. And who you're gonna meet today in this episode, if you don't know her already, is my friend Ashleigh Sergeant. And she's the director of yoga and movement for Envision, but so much more. She's also the head of yoga content for Gaia.com. She has her own yoga school, and check this out. She spent 5 years as the global yoga trainer for Adidas and was honored to be the youngest certified Anusura yoga instructor in the world. So cool history too. Ashleigh, her mother is a yoga teacher as well. And so she began her exploration practice of yoga at a very young age and really dedicated, at least I believe initially, in pursuit of healing a lifelong spine condition. And she lives now pain-free, empowered, vital, inspiring, active, doing great work in the world. And I met Ashleigh a couple years ago when she invited me to teach at the Envision Fest, and we became good friends. I met her the first time going out to Envision a couple years ago to teach. We connected there. We've hung out since then. We hung out a lot at this festival, and she's a beautiful sister. Happy to introduce her to you, to those who don't know her yet. Check out her website, ashleighsargent.com. But check the notes or the name of the podcast to see how that's spelled. And enjoy the episode, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you're inspired to do so, leave us a rating and a review. We'd love that. Help inspire other folks to check this out. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the episode. So you just got done teaching.
Just got done teaching.
What were you teaching about?
It's my favorite class now at Envision.
And what is that?
Call it Total Nervous System Reset.
Nice. Is it Purposely scheduled on Sunday afternoon?
Purposely scheduled on Sunday afternoon before sunset, when everybody, has been partying or not sleeping as much or dancing a lot and a lot of outward input going on.
Yes.
Just want to create a really comfortable, safe space for people to constructively rest. They never have to stand up. They're either on their backs or on their stomachs.
I should never teach at that time slot.
No. Thursday was okay when you taught at that time slot. Yeah.
Even Saturday, but as the week goes along, and it's the same of other festivals I've taught at.
Yeah.
I know, like, all right, an 11 a.m. class on a Thursday is fine, but don't put me 11 a.m. on a Sunday. Because everybody's just now gone to bed. Yeah.
Well, it's taken me, it's one of the things I love so much about curating on a macro scale, because I really get to see the waves of experiences that people are going through throughout the week. It's like there's the whole arc of the full week, and then within that there's the arc of each day, and then of course the arc of each class. And so I really experience that. By the time Sunday comes around, I try to book one of the temples that is pretty much just completely restorative, not in the sense of restorative yoga with props and timed holds or anything along those lines, but just rejuvenative, restorative practice.
Yeah. It was a nice vibe. There's a lot of people in your class.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I taught it last year too, so people are starting to know.
It's a tradition.
Yeah. And I also teach, it's really been a place that I'm taking my personal teaching for a while now. Really some more somatic-based movements and working with the vagus nerve and working to really help people balance the nervous system and tonify their capacity to turn on the rest and digest system to get the parasympathetic system.
Yeah, talk about the vagus nerve. Why is that important?
I could go into some of the sciencey things of it, but actually what I find is the most, and you and I are kind of the same of this, is like I understand a lot of the science of it, and I think it's really interesting, but what I find more interesting is just the direct experience of it.
Yes.
And, from what I know about the vagus nerve is when it's toned, it actually starts to turn on the parasympathetic system.
Right.
And, of course, it's an involuntary part of our biology.
Right, so it's pranic and it's kind of governed by prana.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, like, I can't go in and grab the vagus nerve and with my heart, with my hand, squeeze it and tone it. Yeah. But because its infrastructure runs through the webbing of the diaphragm, we can start to interface with the pranic body in a really tangible way, because simply by breathing.
Yes.
The involuntary breath is happening, but as soon as we start to pay attention to it, our voluntary part of ourselves can start to interface with the involuntary part.
Say that again. So it's always a...
I'm like, and the music is happening.
Stephen was so funny yesterday during the podcast because he came over here and there's two pretty high energy classes going on, and he says, when did yoga, because he's not in the yoga world, I guess. Yeah. He came over from the permaculture world, and he's like, yoga's gotten so aggressive. And we were talking in between how he was calling two aggressive yoga classes. But anyways, you were saying, talk about that one more time, voluntary and how the interaction of voluntary and involuntary.
Well, it's so interesting because you're breathing no matter what, whether you're paying attention to it or not. You're breathing no matter what. It's an involuntary part of our system. The vagus nerve kicking on and off essentially happens through the breath. And we actually have the capacity to interface with the involuntary part of our system. So the parts that are happening without our knowledge. It's like, how do we affect those if they're happening involuntarily? We don't have to think about them. But because the actual innervation of the vagus nerve runs through the fabric of the diaphragm, we do have the capacity.
Voluntary muscle movements basically our only thing we have. So that's how you access it.
Yeah.
The one thing we have, voluntary muscle movement.
Yeah.
Then you access everything else.
Everything else.
Right.
I mean, and that's the practical aspect of it. And then for me, the experience is just so magical. And part of what I love about this class and where I'm going with some of this nervous system teaching is I'm pretty cerebral and pretty heady, and I've studied a lot of anatomy and a lot of the esoteric sciences, and I find it to all be really important, and I love going in from that lens sometimes. But I think some of it came for a really long time of wanting to prove that I knew a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I did want to know the things to know that I was giving proper information.
You partly wanted to know just for yourself, but then there's a part that you want to know because you're a professional and you want to make sure that you're coming across as knowledgeable. Yeah.
And now I find myself more and more just knowing that no matter what, it's the information that people are actually going to digest and assimilate is not going to come from anything I say. It's just going to come from a direct experience.
And that's what I was going to say. I wonder if, the reason that shift in wanting, the intellectual stuff's cool, but then it becomes a little less interesting over time.
Yeah.
Because your experience is actually, I'm just, possibly, your experience becomes stronger than the intellectual knowledge, more substantial, and this would be more valuable to know than philosophical stuff.
Yeah, and just to what you and I were talking about the other night too, I think there's so much going on in the yoga world. It's so saturated, and it's okay. And there's so much maybe feel to need more and to know more. It's so easy to be able to go online and study anything everywhere, and to have this desire to acquire information, and it can be really confusing. There's a lot of noise out there, or a lot of options, and as we see happening in the yoga tradition, there's still this tendency to put a teacher up on a pedestal and to externalize our wisdom, thinking that we really need to get it outside.
Right.
And so I really try to make a conscious decision to really just not make the teaching about me. And my experience, the best way to do that is to just give people space to have their own experience.
Yes.
And when they have their own experience, thousands of years of knowledge can be remembered in an instant. And the discursive mind maybe remembers it a little bit, but you don't even need to, because you actually just start to feel it on a cellular level. You walk out of a Transformational Festival or out of a practice, and you can't actually give, or you maybe don't even want to give name anymore to what just changed. It's just in you.
Yeah, exactly. Why? If anything, it potentially limits it, to anytime you try to define, like trying to describe God, as soon as you even say the word G-O-D, it makes it smaller, or much smaller than what it may actually be. What I think, like, the teachings, the importance of the teachings, which I consider extremely important, so, like, and I know you do too, but they're important to give context for experience. And I think that's the difference between what we're talking about.
Yeah. I love the analogy. I use it all the time. I don't remember where it's from exactly, but the image of pointing at the moon, but we get so obsessed with staring at the finger, essentially, that we're not looking at the moon, meaning that our finger that's pointing towards the thing are all of these techniques.
Yeah. It's a very Envision metaphor. This festival's...
I did not get it from Envision, but I appreciate that.
You know what I mean?
I do. I know what you mean.
It's just a quick side tangent.
Yeah.
Because most people listening to this have never, or who will listen to this, who have never been here. How would you describe this festival to somebody who's never been here?
How much time do you have?
7 words or less.
Let's see. I moved from the mountains, the high mountains in Colorado and Tahoe, down here to the jungle for 2 very different spiritual experiences. One is kind of being on the peak of the mountain and having this pure, clear, crisp silence and quietude. And then coming into the jungle is being completely held by, like, the cacophony of nature, just the full immersion in the pulsation of life.
Such a big part of this festival.
And I think that that's what is the essence of the festival, is I mean, there is so much going on, like lots of festivals, but I feel like the container is actually very strong, and it is an immersion into, I mean, you are in the elements. You're really in the elements. It's hot. It's sweaty.
Before
and there's a
I
surrender
came,
that happens.
or
That has to happen in order to be able to withstand the heat, in order to be able to kind of keep going. And so I think, I don't love to use the term Transformational Festival, but I think it is that. It's a space that...
As much as any festival I've been to.
Yeah. And it's a pilgrimage to get here for almost everybody.
Definitely.
You know, it's not super easy to get here.
Right.
And it is a threshold that crosses over. You are in the elements. People are getting, there's bugs, there's insects, there's monkeys, there's heat, there's the sun, there's the ocean. I feel like it's a really deep...
For many people, they're in a foreign country. That they may not have come to before.
Yeah. So I think of it as immersion. I really like to use the analogy of kind of like a womb-like space. I feel the jungle to be a very feminine type of invitation into awakening.
Yeah.
There is so much happening that it actually invites you into the quietness within yourself. I think because sometimes it just feels like so much, you just pull back into yourself a little bit and can find that quiet in the midst of all the busyness, which is essentially what we're doing in nature. That wasn't 7 words by any means, but I roundabout got there.
Well, it's interesting because all those words, you know, you're used to, or some of the, what you like, all right, there's bugs, there's heat, there's this, there's that. And when I think about it, it's also, those are all the things that make this festival awesome, in part, says the guy staying in an Airbnb.
Says the girl who has a place on site but stays at my air-conditioned house across the street. I know.
Right.
I mean, I have a real immense respect for the pilgrimage that people do make to come here, and you stay in the heat, you stay in your tent, and you are fully immersed in it. It's like a 4-day sweat lodge.
Well, and all the Kundalini yoga big, you know, solstice events, they were always designed to put people in the elements. Like, you know, 7,000 feet in the northern New Mexico desert in the middle of the summer. You know, it's as intense as this in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think that really aids in the transformational. And again, perhaps there's another semantic that at some point we could use instead of transformational.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why, but that I sense the same thing I think you are.
Yeah.
But I think it's the elements, and like, on one hand, everybody gets sleep deprived and all of this. Those are all often the things that all our normal kind of, you know, mechanisms that we have to keep our facade together.
Yep.
Those mechanisms are not accessible anymore when you're having to really like be present in an environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we start to really realize what we are attached to, what we are averse to.
Yeah. And within 3 days, you're over it.
You get over it pretty fast.
Yeah. Maybe even in 24 hours.
You can.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
It's a shedding, I think. And a friend who I brought here who had never been here before, Shandy, who you met from Brazil, was just like, oh.
Yeah.
But his experience was like, I see you guys walking around here, and for me, it's so much. And he said to me, he's like, I see that you're just able to stay in your center. And I think that comes from training and over time, right? You know, it's a toning and a strengthening of our capacity to be always dropped into that place of stillness. Maybe it doesn't feel still, but the place of center just within. And so when we get some of our creature comforts and some of the things that we like to make everything really nice in order to create our space. So I have this incense and this smell and these things, and all those things get taken away. And if we lose ourselves within that, how strong are we actually really cultivating our capacity to stay connected to ourself with the essence when all that's stripped away and we're not comfortable?
It's revealing an identity problem, actually, because that means, you know, this thing, if those are things that make me comfortable or uncomfortable, then that's a conditions that it's dis-ease.
And I love my creature comforts.
Yeah, me too.
I love it. And I always have a little bit of a resistance. That's what I started talking about in my class today, which is how this is an invitation for us to get away from routine. Routine is really good in a lot of ways. It's it's what we teach so much in yoga, right? We learn to actually have a routine for ourselves in the morning. I know you and I are both very dedicated to that, to have a ritual, to have a practice, to have something that we tend to in a similar-ish way every day to create that muscle memory, to create that tending to our vital force. And if it's really working, we should probably be able to handle a couple days where we're not able to do it in the same way that we usually do.
100%.
Yeah. And so it's like, how do you measure the spiritual path? Funny concept to think of because it's non-linear at all, and we're talking about measuring it. Well, for me, it's you actually can learn to be able to remain more quiet and more centered in the midst of total chaos or the midst of being completely uncomfortable, and being thrust into a space where you don't have your creature comforts necessarily allows you to do that in a new way.
Yeah. It's not that hard, This is like it's good to have periodic disruptions in routines for sure, because otherwise it's like going through the motions.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why? It's like I'm at a point like I'm good no matter what I do. I feel that way, you know what I mean? But I feel like I used to feel like I need a practice.
Yeah.
And now I don't. I know I would be good without it.
Yeah.
At least for a period of time.
Yeah.
But I love it. That doesn't always mean I like it. A lot of the times I do it, but it's not because, I can't wait to do it. I don't feel like that often. Sometimes I do. But it's just like, you know what I'm saying? It's almost like a courtship. And it's like a relationship. Like it's like a long-term marriage. It's always just it's a relationship going back and forth, nurturing, and I
feel like it as a longing or a yearning to just want to be with myself,
right.
To be with spirit, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I have to sit down and do this for a certain amount of time. It just, the time arises because I long for that.
Yes.
I also think this has been coming big for me lately is I'm all about the self-love, self-care movement and teaching us to really take care of ourselves first. And I have a hard time identifying or saying like what I do as a profession as a yoga teacher currently, because there's
we talked about
my
that
experience. My experience, there's just...
When people ask you what you do, because
so,
why is that? Other people perceive it different than what you do?
There's that, for sure. I also feel that there's just some serious narcissism happening, and the yoga practice can become fairly narcissistic pretty quickly.
Yeah, I get real annoyed by the yoga community in general. It's all love, I'm part of it, but I think it comes with the territory when dealing with yoga and any spiritual, what do you think about that?
Yeah, the way I'm experiencing it, I've been talking about it lately, is this over-identification with, I need to do what I need to do for me. There's so much empowerment. Like yes, we need to take care of ourselves, and yet there's so much, in my experience, of, oh, well, I need to do this for me, and this is what I have to do for me first. I have to honor myself, and that is true. And we also have to honor our agreements and our commitments to one another. And I feel there's a lot of, whatever, you can use the term spiritual bypassing, that happens when I've experienced people, particularly in the yoga world, backing out of agreements or backing out of something they've committed to because they're like, I just really need to do this for me now. It's like, okay.
Right.
Well, you also committed to this other thing. We're not just committing to show up for ourselves. The whole point of committing to show up for ourselves is so we can show up for others. And if our collection of tools of all the things, our list that we have to do every day just to be able to show up for ourselves, completely pushes the rest of the world out, then I believe it's getting, just becoming a narcissistic thing. It's just tending to, again, our own preferences. It's also disempowering because it's telling us, again, like there's something we have to do in order to be able to be present and be full enough to be with one another. When really we just have to be able to be present and connected with ourselves.
Yeah.
So I feel like the narcissistic side of it, I sit in my teachings. I mean, my whole life is dedicated to this, so it's kind of an ironic thing.
Well, I think I wonder on some level, like how much is this just like humans, and because we're immersed in the yoga world, we're seeing the humans in the yoga world, and then but it does seem at times seemingly amplified in the yoga world, and I don't know if it's because everyone's trying so hard to be like act like enlightened, or what it is. But it does get a really like not real. Like there's a lack in my experience there's just like I like realness. I like
We're
people
feeding into our wounds at that point sometimes.
What do you mean?
I mean like I can go so deep here. I think one of our deepest societal wounds right now is just this you are not enoughness. You know, that we have to acquire and do more and more and more. So this like I have to do the X, Y, and Z thing in order, like for me, feeds into this idea that like we're not enough as we are, and we have to just keep acquiring in some way.
Right.
You know, I sit in these.
That's the real self-love.
That's the real self-love.
When you know you're enough just as you are with everything. Like there's nothing I need to improve.
Yeah.
I'm already perfect like I am. That doesn't mean I don't have a mind and an ego, and the mind often needs work.
Yeah.
You know, that's what yoga is all about, is the mind ultimately.
The mind, yeah.
But like me, you,
we're good.
Perfect.
We're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's been coming up for me from
and just I don't know how this sounds like me, you, perfect.
You're
that
so
means
perfect.
Like all human beings, all beings, inclusive of the me and you. Me, you, teachers at the Envision Festival. Perfect.
More work to be done.
I already said I don't need to practice, and now I'm saying
I know, you're like you're confusing me here. But you know what's been coming up is like I said, my life is dedicated to holding safe, sacred space for people, and it does end up mostly being upper middle class white women.
Yeah, and that's why I love Envision.
Yeah,
because. Yeah, but continue. I don't mean to interrupt
diversity.
you, but it's a break from that.
Yeah, it is.
It's like young folks, as many like
open,
fellas as there are sisters. You know?
And I don't want to put down white upper middle class women. I'm one of them.
Yeah, right.
It's, you know, it's beautiful and great.
Right.
And I do.
That's like I can say a Jewish joke because I'm Jewish.
Yeah, exactly.
You can speak about upper class.
And I still strive to make my offerings open and interested how to make that messaging open to a wider population. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, I mean, I sit there because we also suffer. Even the most privileged people are suffering or struggling and maybe suffering too more in some cases. And I do look around sometimes sitting in these nice yoga studios with these nice mats with all of our nice things. I'm like, can I curse? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, what the fuck are we doing right now? We're sitting in this room talking about our problems, and I create space, and I'm dedicated to holding space for us to have, because women, a lot of women, all people, haven't been given the space to connect with and say it's okay to connect with their struggles. So creating that sacred space. And then sometimes I'm just like, and what the fuck are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? There are people out there whose children are being taken from them. Women are sex trafficking. People don't have water. And we're here like, oh my God, it's so intense for me to like walk into the fluorescent light grocery store now. I can only go to the co-op. Just like, what the fuck are we even talking about right now? Right. You know? And I make light of it. But it's this same aspect of just really having this desire to go, it's not about us ultimately. And to take, just for us to have the gift of habit, like for you and I to sit here and have this conversation and to be talking about the things that we're talking about.
Yeah. Really
connecting to our dharma and our truth, just as the class or the structure we were born into is, hey, guess what? You are struggling and having these things, and you're fine and you're great and you're wonderful, and really helping take what we are doing in our practice to how are you putting that out in the world in whatever your unique way is? Like,
Right.
it
How
is
are
our
you
opportunity to do that.
How are you serving? And to where I think that's becomes, it's not like obviously it's, people are typically not purposefully narcissistic. I'm including myself in the discussion, not like other people. But when it just continues to be about me and my stuff and my healing and me, and it's still me centric. That's a good starting point, actually. If somebody is, there's been enough trauma there that it needs to be in that place for a period of time. And depending on the person, that could be the whole lifetime. It just depends. Then eventually, though, if it's not going to plateau, it has to become about serving others, serving other beings, whatever that may be. But I think like the heart of that, it's not like, oh, now I'm so selfless, but it's actually, that's the way that I get blissful.
Exactly.
And that's the difference. The dilemma is like, if you're going to be selfish, be the wiser selfish. Because when your altruism is your predominant disposition, you're still the first one to benefit. If I'm going out and serving folks and it's genuine, it's from the heart, and it's part of the dharma of my life, the way you do, the way I do, and the way so many people here do. That's going to be the neuroses are just not going to have enough energy to disturb our life in any significant way.
Well, when we're just to bring it back to super basic mind awareness, and our faculties are just constantly moving outward, we have the fulfilling experience of giving gets exhausting because you're just going outward. So depending on, like you said, where you are, it may take a real long time, which is fine, to actually create that relationship going inward. But once you do create that relationship going inward, like we said, and we actually long for and yearn for that just time of being with ourself, the natural inherent capacity, I mean, it's generative, is to go back out,
That's right.
I mean, I'm one
it's
of
these... It's like tides.
Yeah, I mean, I live here in Costa Rica in the jungle, and I've actually found a really beautiful pulse with it, because I go out and I teach and expend a lot of energy outward, and then come back here and really fill up. But then the natural desire also is like, okay, and I want to offer back out. I really do believe that everyone is here to just offer something, whatever that may be. I really, it was one of the deep awakenings for me of the study of Tantra and yoga, is this idea that the universe is creating through you as you in every moment. You are a vessel for creativity.
Right. They go to the extent of saying that the purpose of the whole creation was for the creator, or whatever that may be, to experience itself. Yeah, which is a cool, it's just the difference, I think, between the Eastern way of thinking about things and the Western. We would like, well, what do you mean? The creator creating creation so it can experience itself. To think of that like we're trying to figure it out scientifically, it's like, no, it's actually more like a poem. You know what I mean? It's a way of like putting the mind into a disposition that will help to tune it to reality.
And that's why we have that experience of when we actually look at one another and have a moment of awakening. I did this in the opening ceremony. It's a teaching from my teacher, Douglas Brooks, where he says, you can have the awareness of, I'm not you. We can look at one another and go like, I'm not you. Like, I'm Ashleigh, you're Jai Dave.
Right.
I'm a woman, you're a man. We're having different experiences. I'm something like you. Like, okay, well, we're both humans. We're both in these bodies. We're both obviously on a path of spirituality. And then I'm nothing but you. And then we have this realization like,
so I'm something like you, and then
nothing but you. We are one. We are the same. And in my experience, when we have that revelation of, anytime we have a deep connection with someone, we could have that just by going through that process of talking, I'm not you, I'm something like you, I'm nothing but you. But then anytime you have a really, really deep conversation with someone, where you share an experience, and someone relays their experience to you, and you're like, oh my God, that is exactly my, like, right? This is consciousness waking up to itself through us, through one another. That's why relationship and partnership is so incredible.
Right.
And this is where I know you and I really relate on. This is where I want to help just get away from the guru thing, away from having to receive that awakening from someone else, that really it's within the light of awareness within one another, as much as it is connecting with ourselves. That's why something like Envision and these kind of gatherings is so huge, because we're here taking care of one another. We're here looking each other in the eye really purposefully. And when we look in each other in the eye, that reflection of like, okay, we are the same. Like we get each other.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, that all comes from the universe is seeking, like we're being asked to pay attention at every moment.
It's very liberating to have that, because it's simple and it doesn't have to turn in, for me, it doesn't need to turn into like this fluffy thing to where, you know, it becomes, you know, and I know you feel the same, like, because sometimes it turns into that, you know, and that's, I think, what we're kind of maybe pushing up against a little bit when we're talking about the yoga world in general, but not also just, you know, consciousness culture. Because we've been in such a, I think, closed down, you know, society, generally speaking, for so long. And now here, really not just recently, but I think starting in, at least in recent history, 1960s, and continuing on today. But it goes to that other kind of polarity of it, to where, like, what I've, you know, feel, at least for myself, it's like everything is real simple and everything is already like spiritual, and everything, you know what I mean? It doesn't even need to be said a lot of the times. And you can feel that particularly at places like this, you know, and that's it, you know.
One of the things that I think it's the Vijnana Bhairava, one of the meditations is to just completely immerse yourself in anything, whatever sensation. You can just completely immerse yourself in eating a strawberry. You can just completely immerse yourself in just putting all your attention on the sensation of air on your skin. You know, it's really quite simple. And anything, when we just drop our awareness into it, takes us directly to that space of oneness, of wholeness, of it's really quite simple. And the jungle here, you know, I think about it, you can't hear it right now because we have other things going on, but jungle is so loud. It's so loud. And I remember when I first moved from Tahoe to here, and I've been doing like a nada yoga practice of really like deep inner listening to just the internal sound, internal silence. And I got to the jungle and I was like, I can't hear anything. Like, it's so the cacophony of insects and sounds. And it was just this other invitation from a tantric tradition to be like, oh, literally anything and everything. If the universe is consciousness, and you know, the universe, the one, has come into form as everything, which, if you want to get scientific about it, concept of fractals and fractalization, you know, confirms that we kind of just fractalize into infinite form, that there's nothing that exists that doesn't take us right back to that space of wholeness. And so even just a practice I do here in the jungle, and you can do it anywhere, is just letting myself be completely immersed by the sound, or letting myself, you can do it on the yoga mat, right? You have a sensation in your body. You just let your awareness go completely into that sensation. And so my point to all that is, like, it's really profound, and it's not necessarily easy, but it's actually really simple. It's really simple. It's really simple.
Profound things are simple, and I think in general, it's like things that would be like, it's almost like it's when the complicated becomes simple. And that's like dharana, that strawberry, full focus on it's concentrating life force on not pushing away anything. And not so the two concepts, one, I guess, would be all right, if I'm eating a strawberry, then like the entire awareness is on a strawberry. Coming into jungle space, environment like this, that also puts you in a place where that type of thing is actually much easier. So you're so much more connected to the natural element.
Yeah.
Then I think like what I was hearing in your description of the jungle is so loud and everything's there, that being not concentrating on anything specific and not also pushing anything away. So it's like allowing everything to be just as is. And both of those kind of like, one's concentrating energy, one's allowing anything. Those are both enjoyable, and
that's the essence of, in my experience, truly nature of our true selves is, it's enjoyable. It essentially feels good.
Right. That's the main point, isn't it? Because it's not about that. That's the difference between like, oh, it's like a healing a neurosis. It's about my wounds. It's like, versus us like, oh, this is how we enjoy our lives.
Yeah. And I don't need to like go harp too much into the like difference between masculine and feminine pathways. But because we need both, but we talk so much about, the ancient technology of yoga, and
masculine's
it's had its way. It's at its time. Not that it has to go away. I'm not trying to annihilate anything. But in my experience,
it can make some room, though.
There's a little room. There's a lot of room. But these techniques, right? There are these systems and these technologies, and the masculine aspect of the yoga tradition has been very much taken over by masculine for a really long time. I mean, which is okay. And in the sense that, I study some traditions that it's like, this is a particular breath pattern that you do in this particular way for this amount of time, and then certain Vedic chanting, if you don't chant it this way, then it doesn't work, and just this deep, I experience it sometimes as rigidity. And after a while, I get really bored. I've been doing this practice for 20 years, and it can get boring and so for a long time, my concept of, oh, this is boring also came up as, oh, that's just an ego part of yourself. Like, you need to discipline yourself more. And there's a lot of truth to that. To acquire a certain technology, to understand a certain way to do something, to go to a certain teacher to get an initiation and X, Y, and Z steps in order to further your practice. And also, that's bullshit. Because you literally can just breathe and relax into the water and experience oneness. And I don't need a teacher to tell me how to do it. And I bow to all of my teachers, and I study with my teachers, and I'm been initiated into 2 different lineages, and I'm maha respect to all the giants who we stand on their shoulders and all of that. And that, from my understanding, is also a resurgence and a reclamation of the feminine path, which is, you don't need shit from anyone else, actually. It's helpful. And I believe they work best when used together, because sometimes I need to sit down and count my breath in for 4 and out for 4 and do a particular mantra, certain, and that training helps to train the mind, right? And at some point in time, that's also boring. Yeah, sure. And I also don't need it, because you can do those things to help you relax into this openness. And at some point, you can also just relax into that openness.
It's like a slightly more subtle version of the same thing when needing an external teacher is like, okay, it has to be this way in order. And as you're saying, there's some important context for that. Yeah. And then at the same time, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, like you can't tell me that because I didn't chant the Mrityunjaya mantra exactly the Vedic place, that
that might as well
the thousands of times I've done it mean nothing.
Yeah, that's just, it comes off as really no different than dogmas from the religions that many of us grew up in. Exactly. That we kind of came to yoga after kind of moving away from that kind of stuff, and then we create the same dogmas in a different expression through yoga teachings, yoga practices. The best, and I think that we're all going to have teachers regardless. That's how life works, so that's why it's not important to like put them on, some pedestal and that type of thing, even though we do that naturally, because sometimes our teachers just help us so much and benefit our lives so much that that's what happens. And but when being able to just relax,
Yeah.
you know,
Relax
and like
into it.
this stuff's it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like you're saying, it doesn't need to be this exact way every single time within that, you know, I think the context you're speaking.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how your system is, but in like Kundalini, there's certain things like they should stay the same. There's certain things they should stay the same. And that's not, I don't think, what we're talking about.
No.
We're talking about our disposition in our relationship to the practice. Would you agree with that?
I would. It goes back to that moon analogy I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah.
Because the finger represents the technique. Okay. And we can get so obsessed with perfecting the technique and doing the technique. I mean, I found myself doing this. I acquire, I'm supposed to do this mantra and then this mantra, and then I have to do this thing, and my practice becomes this set of things that I have to do to reach a certain state. And that's beautiful. Yeah. I love that practice for a lot of time. And then sometimes I'm like, this is boring. Mm-hmm. That rub, when I say it's boring, brings up a lot for some people. They're like, oh, well, that's just your resistance to something. But my point of it is it doesn't become enjoyable. Right. It's not enjoyable at that time. And so when I'm not experiencing joy and fulfillment from it, then for me at some point I'm like, oh, I'm so connected to the steps. Like, all these techniques are tools that help us point to get to the moon, the wholeness, the space within. And we can get so obsessed with or so connected to perfecting those things that we do all those things and we don't actually rest in and reside in what we're actually looking at. Does it make sense?
It does make sense.
I'm not sure if I'm explaining it the best way I ever have.
Well, it made sense to me. And I think, like, you know, especially for me in the earlier years with it, like, that kind of rigidity becomes, here's a way of saying it, rigidity becomes less useful over time. Mm-hmm. Where it's, I think, more useful earlier on when you're still developing the habits. Yeah. You know, and like, so if, like, perhaps you and I, we don't have our problem is not commitment to a practice. No. You know, I mean, we do a practice. That's what we do. Yeah. It's like, I don't have a problem, like, I don't have a commitment problem with brushing my teeth. Right. It's just what I do. Like, I would not understand why I wouldn't do it. Yeah. Right. And so. Good example. So then, now that it's no longer like this need to, like, have this kind of energy around structure. Yeah. Then the structures that are there, I think, need to take a different form. So not changing the science or the art or the system itself, and not diluting it, because that's where we go. That's what I mean by going swinging. We swing to the other polarity. For sure. And then it's not. It turns into, at times, things that I wouldn't consider even yoga anymore. Yeah. And so it's not diluting these systems that are so very sophisticated and just glorious. And have been tested over thousands of years. And not to discredit, like, I believe everyone should choose at least a system or some path to actually really immerse themselves in. Mm-hmm. Whether you stay with that or not, I don't think really matters. But especially with all the options out there in the world right now, like you're saying, it can become like, that's not even yoga because we're just acquiring all these different things and putting a hodgepodge together. Yeah. Like, these are ancient technologies that actually have been proven to work over thousands of years. It, you know, behooves us to actually abide by them a little bit, to use that as a container and then find freedom within that, which I think is what you're saying. Right. It's like, okay, why do I really have a better idea than what's been put together? Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I don't know what I sense when we're discussing this. And I know for me, it's the case. We're talking about our relationship to the system. Yeah. As opposed to changing the system itself. 100%. Yeah. 100%. And just becomes relaxed, you know, and just more. It's very positive, actually. It's just over time, it's just more and more and more enjoyable. And then it's so enjoyable that you're like, well, let me not be so rigid about it. It
Yeah.
becomes feminine.
And perhaps that's the
Ideally.
pathway in.
Yeah.
Also, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
well, maybe.
Oh,
more-
maybe it's applied earlier for some folks like
Perhaps,
me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that I needed it, and I think a lot of us in our Western culture, that might be tipping a little bit, but we need, a lot of us need that. It's not rigidity, but we need the discipline, like we said, because our minds are all over the place. We are distracted by so many things, so we actually need the discipline and the focus.
Otherwise,
First.
the life force is leaking all over the place.
Everywhere.
Right.
And so building that container is what allows us to then relax into it.
I feel the same way. Discipline. My teacher used to say that discipline's the only. He said, other than God, discipline's the only friend you've got. And we think sometimes of discipline as being rigidity, but discipline is containment, containing your vital energy, so we know that it's flowing in the direction that's going to be useful.
Yeah. I love the word abhyasa. It's one
What
of
is
my
that?
favorite words. Abhyasa, the definition that I know of it and love it is dedicated, consistent practice over time with devotion. But for me, the key point I'm like, I can consistently practice over time, like,
With
no
devotion,
problem,
right.
but with devotion, like because you love it.
That's a great
and
concept.
you want to.
Yeah.
You know, and when the devotion and the service, the love is not there, it becomes a little stale.
Yeah, right.
You know, it just becomes these practices just become another thing to add to your to-do list. And like, who the hell needs another thing on their to-do list?
Yeah.
Without the
great.
devotion.
Consistent practice over time with devotion. Key ingredient.
Yeah, with devotion.
I love that. How do you keep it juicy? How do you keep it fresh? Sometimes you need disruption pattern in the sadhana, in the routine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to go to the jungle and not sleep that much and
sweat
a lot and dance all night and meet new people and
reconnect with what created you in the first place.
Yeah.
On that note, we're 10 minutes away from Grateful Dead hour.
Oh my gosh, we have to go there right now. I tried to find out what the set was, and I was told I will never know until I hear it.
All right.
So we'll go there.
We got to be there for the opening number.
Because you too can be a yogi and love the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. And what?
And love the Grateful Dead.
Oh, there's so many of us.
There's so many of us. I love that.
It's like a classification of one division of the human race,
true.
yogis that are deadheads.
It's true. On that funny note, someone said something this morning that I never heard a quote from Jerry. We'll end on this funny note.
Yeah.
Jerry would say, "We're like licorice." Did you ever hear this?
Keep
We're
going.
like licorice. People who don't like licorice really don't like licorice, and people who like licorice love licorice.
All right.
I think that's true for a lot of things.
Cheers.
Yeah,
Thank you,
cheers.
Ashleigh.
Much love. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Ashleigh for being a part of it. AshleighSergeant.com. Check her out. Follow her on her social media outlets. Thank you to the Life Force Academy for helping to make this happen. Thank you to Envision Festival for allowing us to be a part of that beautiful, beautiful experience. So happy we got that in February, and hoping to be there again sometime soon. Thanks to Ashleigh again for inviting me and to come to and teach at Envision and make that experience part of my life. Very grateful for that. Thank you, Ashleigh. Thank you to Simrit for the exquisite music. Simrit Live in Los Angeles 2019. Do you have that downloaded on your Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your music, iTunes? Simrit, S-I-M-R-I-T. The new album recorded just a few months ago. You're hearing it now. Live in Los Angeles 2019, recorded at the Wilshire Ebell Theater in LA. Incredible night. I was there in person. It was magical. And this album, this recording is mixed so well. It sounds so good. The performances are incredible. It really captures the magic of what it was like to be there that night. I'm gonna let it ride. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being a part of all of this. Thanks for listening. Enjoy.